Countries also have their own internal justice systems, like we mentioned the Ukraine prosecutions going on against some Russian soldiers now, or after the U.S. invasion, the Iraqi government put their former leader, Saddam Hussein, on trial and executed him. Or without any foreign war, relatively recently, Egypt deposed its one-time authoritarian leader and put him on trial.
It's what everyone had been waiting to see. Pictures of Hosni Mubarak, the man who'd ruled his country for decades, inside a defendant's cage in an Egyptian courtroom. It was the first time a modern Arab leader has been put on trial fully by his own people. The ailing 83-year-old is charged with murder and attempted murder over the protesters killed during the uprising that overthrew him.
In some countries, that was considered shocking or impossible, and yet the notion that law governs people means no person can be above the law, even the most powerful. But finding a way to put Vladimir Putin on trial internationally would be different. Over half a century after the World War II example I mentioned, there was a new war crimes tribunal set up around 2003, the International Criminal Court at The Hague in the Netherlands, which has been discussed much lately. Now, it is designed to try war crimes and genocide. It has convicted once powerful heads of state, including the former Liberian leader, Charles Taylor. He was actually the first former head of state convicted this way since all the way back to Nuremberg.
As president of Liberia from 1997 to 2003, Charles Taylor was a striking figure in his trademark white suit and cane. Its allegations of murder, rape, torture, and forcing children to become soldiers. The rebels were infamous for chopping off the limbs of civilians, a signature act of the 11-year Civil War.
Taylor is currently serving his 50-year prison sentence that he got from that proceeding. The court also has held a trial of a sitting head of state, Milosevic. The Hague even featured a truly remarkable incident when a Bosnian general on trial drank poison in the court, in open court, trying to avoid what justice he might face.
The International Criminal Tribunal.
Tonight, an international court is a crime scene after this former general shocked the judges.
Mr. Praljak, you may be seated.
Saying he was not a war criminal, rejecting their verdict.
Stop, please. Please sit down.
Then drinking a bottle of mysterious liquid. In the courtroom, confusion. The interpreter translating the bottle contained poison.
I have taken poison.
We suspend, please, the curtains.
Now, that shows you this thing can matter. I mean, The Hague has its jurisdiction, it's held trials, it's exercised legal authority. So many see it as the main avenue to investigate these Russian actions and allegations in Ukraine. So it might be ready to even possibly put Vladimir Putin on trial if that becomes practicable in the future, which is a major if. Now, ICC officials are already on the ground in Ukraine from this court. The Biden administration says that it supports some types of help, including gathering evidence. But here's the thing. Now that you have the history and you see what the court does and you see some of the trials it's held, here's the thing. The Biden administration is against joining this court, the ICC, just like the last administration and the one before that. In fact, both parties in the U.S. have generally opposed courts that could put U.S. officials on trial or even funding and cooperating with the ICC. And the reasoning is largely admitted. It is a self-interested kind of double standard logic that asserts maybe only other countries could possibly commit war crimes. That's kind of the logic President Bush cited in opposing anything that he said might drag Americans before that court.
Well, the International Criminal Court is troubling to the United States. As the United States works to bring peace around the world, our diplomats and or soldiers could be dragged into this court. And that's a very troubling.
Very troubling to him, and he has a point about that process. Indeed, he could have been talking about himself because years later in 2012, a different court abroad found Bush guilty of war crimes in Iraq.
The five-panel tribunal unanimously decided that Bush and Blair committed genocide and crimes against peace and humanity when they invaded Iraq in 2003 in blatant violation of international law.
And just as that example of a foreign prosecutor went after Bush for a ground war in Iraq, another could conceivably pursue Obama for his drone air war, which has killed civilians. This is not just hypothetical stuff. The Guardian, a respected British publication, ran a human rights scholars piece asserting Obama likely violated international law, and as you see on the screen, quote, may be guilty of war crimes. Now, Bill Clinton took a technical step that involved the ICC back in 1988, but really had the same view as Bush, saying he opposed any jurisdiction over U.S. personnel or ratifying the treaty. He also recommended that same stance for the next president. Now, does this war and these atrocities that I've shown you here a little bit, and I'm sure you've seen over the last several months, does it change any of that for the U.S.? Well, I asked Biden official and Pentagon spokesperson John Kirby, and he reiterated that despite the president's comments about Putin being a war criminal, the Biden administration opposes the ICC for this same stated reason.
I think that I would just speak to the concerns we've had in the past about the court and the possibility of possible prosecutions of American troops in war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and that's been a longstanding concern of the United States Department of Defense.
Longstanding concern from what Clinton said to Bush, to the Trump administration, which was very publicly anti-ICC, to Biden's position. That's the current legal and foreign policy bind for the U.S. if you want to look at this in depth and seriously. The bottom line is what Kirby said there is they oppose the main avenue for international accountability for alleged war crimes by Russian soldiers or even Putin himself. And let's be clear, this is hard stuff. Many experts who've worked in this field for years agree that there are real complexities and drawbacks to the way the ICC runs, from its limited powers to the fact that countries like Russia and U.S. won't join it anyway, to its lack of enforcement body, to the practical dynamics that it really does, as one called it, a victor's justice. It does reflect the geopolitical reality of who wins wars. It doesn't have its own army. It's not some independent ethical baseline for determining war crimes. It works with the winners, the victors. So while the ICC is taking these concrete actions now, even without the U.S., as I've shown you, and these tribunals may deter some leaders out there, this is one of those stories where I just have to tell you the facts as they stack up. And the reality for Ukraine is as grim on this score as it is in so many other aspects of the war. Putin's alleged activities do not suggest, from the intelligence we have and the public accounts, that he is worried about going on trial. And Russia's nuclear arsenal is a hard fact of international life. It's a nuclear arsenal that allows Russia and whoever's in charge of it to defy truly much of the Western world order. So the Ukrainian people have gotten some help along the way, but clearly not enough on this score or on the ground. So there are not many good options. That's just the situation. And if the rest of the world decides that it does want to do more to stop Putin through international legal jurisdiction or economic measures or other ways to try to hold him accountable or deter what he might do next, well, like so much else in this brutal war, it is going to require a lot more collective sacrifice.